Hey guys, before this video starts, I wanted to apologize for the lack of content lately. Much like a lot of my friends in the community, I've been pretty sick lately, and my voice is out for longer than it probably ever has been. Also, if my voice is a little weak in this video, that's why. I'd also like to thank Nightmarish for helping me on this video. He's an awesome narrator and has a lot of great content over on his channel, including a part 2 of our collaboration, so be sure to check him out. I'll link him in the description and on screen at the end of this video. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoy. I work downtown, standard 8 to 5 hours. Once in a while, I work overtime, but not often. And not on a day this happened. It was just a couple minutes after 5 p.m. when I left work. It's just a few blocks from my office building to the train station. There are a few bars and back alleys along the walk, but the worst I've ever dealt with along there are homeless folks who get a little aggressive asking for cash. They don't bother me much. The train ride from the station downtown to the station where I park my car is about 40 minutes. If I'm lucky, I manage to get a seat and don't have to stand for the whole ride. On that day, I was lucky, more or less. I got a seat next to a window, which left the seat next to me open. At the next stop, 3 men got on. One of them sat next to me, and the other sat on the seats across from me. I was listening to music on my iPod, so I really couldn't hear them. I did notice, however, that the guy sitting next to me was trying to move closer to me on the seat. He would move close enough that his leg was touching mine, so I'd scoot away, and he'd move closer again. Eventually, I was pressed right against the window, and had no doubt that he had more than a few inches of free space on his other side. I'd noticed that they would occasionally say something and then all look at me. It was incredibly creepy and uncomfortable. I was nervous about getting off at my stop, but mine is the second to last on the train line, so when the train pulled into my station, I got off. The guy sitting next to me tried to grab my arm, but I was moving quickly and was able to get out. I was hoping they wouldn't get off the train there. It was a busy station and they couldn't know where I was parked. They did. I guess it was their luck that they targeted me. I park in the furthest lot from the station because the parking there is free. It's about a 7-minute walk, which isn't usually too bad, but my lot tends to be pretty quiet, and I was really worried about those guys following me. As a bit of background, I was fat. I work an office job, and I was sitting all day and not working out. Add to that my strong sweet tooth, and you've got a recipe for a bad body. I was about 30 pounds overweight and probably couldn't run for more than 30 seconds. Sad, considering I ran track and played hockey in high school. I still play hockey, but on a women's daytime league, and it's not really competitive. I'm the youngest on my team by about 20 years, but my mom was on the team, and it's something fun to do together. I was crossing the bridge over the road from the station to the parking lots when I noticed the 3 guys less than 10 feet behind me. I wasn't carrying a knife or any pepper spray because it's illegal in my Canadian city. I know a little bit about personal protection though, so I put my car key and my house key between my fingers, so if I needed to hit someone it would hurt them, at least a little. The guys followed me across the main lot. They didn't hide the fact that they were there, and the more nervous I was, the louder they laughed. I managed to get across the road between the lots before they got to the road. They had to wait for a couple cars to pass before they could cross. I was almost halfway across the lot when they crossed the road. I started to run. I could hear their feet pounding pavement behind me. I used my clicker to unlock my car when I got close. I wrenched the door open, so glad that no one was parked next to me. I had barely closed my door and slammed the lock when the guys reached my car. They were banging on my windows and yelling. I'd never been so afraid in my life. I was worried they'd break the windows and get in. There was a guy at the back, banging on the back of my hatchback, so I couldn't reverse out of my spot without running him over. I should've, but I was afraid and wasn't thinking. I was screaming, but no one was around to hear me. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew it wasn't anything good. I wished I had the screamer my mom had given me for protection, but it needed a new battery, so I didn't bring it with me. That thought, the one about the screamer, made me realize I had something even better. When you're being assaulted, you're not supposed to scream for help. No one wants to help. You scream fire because everyone wants to watch the blaze. So I turned on my car alarm. It was incredibly loud in my car. So loud, I thought I would go deaf. But it had the reaction I wanted. The guy started backing off. I saw people walking into the lot, looking in the direction of my car. People could see what was going on. The guys took off back towards the train station, and I drove home crying. The next night, I started working out. I've worked out almost every day since then. If those cars hadn't been there in the road at that time, if I'd run just a little slower, if I'd been too slow clicking the lock, it all could have ended so much differently. I've lost 20 pounds since then and have gained a great deal of muscle. I quit my job. I've had anxiety issues for years, and this encounter made it so much worse. I never want to feel that powerless again.
I'm 22, female, and live in London, and I have done for 4 years. I was coming home from a gig one Wednesday night. It was probably around 11:30, and I just made my switch to my final tube line of the night. It was fairly busy. I'd say probably around 10 or so people on the same carriage as me. I sit down on the flip-out seats nearest the door. As I've just been to a gig, I'm a little tipsy, but definitely not drunk. I'm very cautious of my surroundings. There's a couple of girls sat opposite me and then a smallish man. Everyone looks fairly normal. The man gets up and flips out the seat next to me and sits down. Now, to put me into some context, I'm a 5'8" competitive weightlifter. This evening, I was wearing all black with a leather jacket and heavy boots. I look like I'm in a lesbian biker gang. If someone was going to attack anyone, I would be a fair challenge. So when this little dude sits down next to me, I'm like, okay, a bit weird that he moved from the more comfortable seats to the shitty flippy out ones. I quickly glance over him. He doesn't look crazy. He doesn't smell of anything, and he doesn't look high, and he's dressed fairly well. But he sits there, completely angled towards me, like he's turned as far in my direction as he can. I can feel his gaze like boring a hole into the side of my head. I have my headphones in, and I just look straight ahead. So when he starts twitching, like someone with Tourette's stifling a tick, so I'm genuinely put at ease for a little while. However, with the twitching, he starts biting his hand. And again, I'm like, just a tick thing. But then he just sinks his teeth in. Flesh, blood, and everything. He loosens his hold on his hand and then twitches and bites down again. So naturally, I'm gonna get the fuck off this sealed underground container. So I get off at the next stop. The stop I actually need to get off at is the one a couple after this one. I walk off the platform as if I'm leaving, so he would think I was leaving. Because I was on the Victoria line, I just assumed another tube would be along in the next couple of minutes. However, it wasn't, and I didn't want to miss the last train home. So I go to another way onto the platform and get back on the same train a few cars down. Now, when I get off the first car, the creepy guy looked at me super weirdly. Kinda like, longingly. I can't even place the kind of look it was really, it just freaked me the fuck out. So we get to the next stop and I see the guy walking down the platform. Now, at 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday night, when you're alone, you barrel down the platform to the exit as quickly as you can move. Nobody really wants to hang about down there. So when I see the creepy guy just ambling down the platform at the next stop, it tells me something is off. He's walking, looking around, looking dejected. And then he clocks me. It becomes painfully apparent to him that I'd moved down the train to get away from him. Luckily, the doors had just closed. He makes eye contact with me and starts shrieking and banging on the closed doors, blood from his bitten hand smearing everywhere as the train pulled away. That sight has rattled me and has continued to do so months afterwards.
This is without a doubt the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. I've only told a few people, but feel like I need to share it here in case it helps any students traveling abroad to be more cautious. So, a little background first. This happened to me about 5 years ago when I was 19 and studying abroad in Italy. Our school had its own campus, about an hour outside of Rome, in a quiet town where the Pope has a summer place. Part of our school's program in Italy was that we had to leave campus for 10 days to vacation and explore Europe in October. Everyone would split off into their friend groups and travel. I didn't really have a group I was attached to, but not wanting to go by myself, I asked these two girls I was friendly with if I could travel with them. They were best friends and roommates and were nice enough and said I could go with them. We decided to travel from Rome to Austria, Prague, and Germany via Eurail. We went the entire trip having fun and without incident, until the last day, which is where my awful experience begins. On our last day, we were in Munich, meeting up with most of our class, as a school tradition of sorts. The two girls I was traveling with and I had tickets to take the overnight train that night back to Rome from Munich, which left around midnight. During the day, one of the girls tells me that she had changed her plans 10 days ago, before we even left, and was going to stay in Munich overnight and come back the next day, which was a surprise to me, but I still wasn't that worried because she was joining up with our classmates and staying in a booked hostel with them, and I would still be traveling with this other girl. Then, to my dismay, the other girl says she's changing her mind and staying overnight in Munich too. I asked her where she planned to stay, as we hadn't booked a room in a hostel. She said she would sneak into the hostel and share a bed with the other girl. I told her that I was really uncomfortable traveling alone, and that it wasn't fair for her to abandon me like that. She told me, nonchalantly, that I could just find a hostel and book another ticket if I cared so much. I told her I didn't have the extra money to pay for a separate ticket back to Rome, let alone a hostel in addition to that. I was a college student on a very tight budget and had already spent a lot on this trip and didn't have enough in my bank account. Despite my pleas, those petty girls said essentially that it wasn't their problem and they ditched me. Luckily, we had already met with another group of our classmates who felt bad for me and spent the entire last day of our vacation running all around Munich trying to find a hostel to stay at that night, and even offered to pull together money to help me pay for a ticket back. Unfortunately, it was Oktoberfest in Germany, and literally every hostel was completely booked. And despite my attempts to sneak into my friends' hostels with them, I was stopped and thrown out. At this point, it's nighttime. I was defeated and worried, but my other classmates who had tried to help me were still sticking with me. I figured, at this point, the only options I had were to sleep outside on a bench in Munich, which is totally unsafe and ridiculous, or to take the overnight train back to Rome by myself. Not super safe, but I figured I'd be around other people, so maybe not completely awful. So, I decided to go ahead and take the overnight train back to Rome by myself, and my classmates walked me to the station and saw me on the train. Those guys ended up being some of my closest friends in years to come. So, now I'm on this overnight train by myself, and I head to the carriage. The way it was set up, it was this room off a hallway with 6 seats. No beds, because I was trying to save money. I was the first one in my carriage, and so I sit next to the window on one side, and I put my giant backpacker's pack, which was my only luggage, on the 2 seats next to me. Eventually, 2 German guys in their 30s come in and are polite enough and sit opposite me. They converse with each other, they've got suitcases, etc., and are looking at maps of Rome and tourist things to do. I feel safe enough with these guys since they're minding their own business. But this is where it gets bad. I settle in and listen to music and try to sleep for a bit, and perhaps after an hour or so, I start to notice that there's a super sketchy guy standing right outside our carriage, in the middle of the hallway, just staring at me. I'm completely freaked out because, 1, No one is supposed to just be in the hallway standing there. You're either on your way to the loo or headed back to your carriage. Why would anyone just be standing in the hallway? And 2, he didn't break eye contact with me once I looked at him. He just kept staring at me with this sinister look on his face, like he wanted to eat me up. So I'm kind of freaking out and try to look away and pretend like I didn't notice him. I wait a bit to see if he was just a normal guy going to the loo or something. But when I look back, he's still there and is still leering at me from behind the window door of my carriage. I want to go shut the curtains to our carriage so he can't look in, but I don't want to get too close to him or piss him off or anything. So I turn to the 2 German guys and quietly tell them that the guy there is creeping me out and staring at me and making me uncomfortable. And I asked them if one of them could casually, in a minute or so, close the curtains. I'd hoped they'd be men and kind of protect me and tell the guy to bug off or whatever, but they seemed annoyed at me and mumbled that they would, but never did. When I brought it up again, they acted kind of miffed, but eventually shut the curtain. I thought that surely would have deterred the guy from lurking, and soon fell asleep. A few hours later, I awoke to 3 young Germans in their mid to late 30s join our carriage in the remaining 3 seats. As they come in, I notice that the creepy guy from before is still there, standing just outside my door. I kind of freak out inside and really don't feel comfortable at all. I try to talk to the younger Germans, but they weren't very friendly and perhaps didn't speak English very well. It's been hours at this point, and I notice that I really have to pee, but the only way for me to get to the loo is to go outside of the carriage and down the hallway to the loo at the very end of the train. I noticed that when the younger Germans came in, they moved the curtain a bit so I can see the creepy dude standing out there, still leering at me. He refused to go away. I noticed that when people walk by to go to the loo or whatever, he kinda acts casual, like he's waiting for someone or something, and looks away from my carriage, but once they're gone, he's back at it again. I try to hold it as long as I can, but this is like a 12-hour train ride, and it would be another 4 hours or more before we made it to Rome, and there was no way I was going to make it. At this point, everyone in my carriage has been asleep for a long time, and I don't want to wake anyone. I have to nudge the young Germans on my way out of the carriage, and I try to tell them I'm going to the loo, and could they just keep an eye on me and the creepy lurker, and they brush me off like I'm a jerk for waking them up, and go back to sleep. I exit the carriage, freaked out of my mind, and also about to pee my pants. Of course, I basically run into the creepy dude standing outside my carriage. There's hardly any room in the hallway, and he's not giving me any space. He's staring me down. I'm about 5'4", and he was towering over me at like 6'2" or something, so I do my best to book it to the loo as fast as I can, and lock the door behind me. My heart is racing, and I'm going as fast as I can so that, hopefully, he hasn't followed me here. But alas, I get out of the loo, and he is right there, with this disgusting smile on his face. I mean, I don't like to exaggerate, but there was evil in his eyes, and it chilled me. I was sick to my stomach. I tried to squeeze by him, and he started to press himself against me. I gave him my nastiest face, and yelled at him, "Let me go!" And praise tiny baby Jesus, there was a man headed to the loo just then. So the creepy dude moved off me, and I booked it back to my carriage, where I proceeded to stay for the remainder of the ride. I had thought my outburst and little scene I caused would have deterred that sketchy guy from creeping on me anymore, but when I looked up at some point, I noticed he was right back where he was, in the hallway staring at me. At this point, I was kinda in disbelief that someone could be so blatantly creepy, so I started to wonder if there was actually a seat out in the hallway that was cheaper than a shared carriage. But then I realized that when I left to go to the bathroom earlier, I had seen no seats, and I also remembered one unsettling detail too. This guy had no luggage, not even a briefcase. This was a 12+ hour trip from Germany to Rome, so everyone on this train was either coming or going from a work or pleasure trip. So the fact that this guy had no luggage or briefcase or anything on him, and was just standing in the hallway staring at me, made my stomach drop. This man did not have good intentions, and I couldn't rationalize it any other way. I spent the last hour or so of the trip devising my plan for once the train arrived in Rome. I knew the train station there very well, and knew that the metro train I needed to transfer to get back to my campus was down several flights of stairs and around more than a few twists and turns. I felt pretty confident, so when the train stopped, I had my backpack on ready to go. The other Germans got out of the train ahead of me, and the creepy guy had to move for them to pass. I quickly followed in between them and jumped off the train and booked it through the station, without looking behind me. Thank God it was crowded in the station with people heading to work, etc., so I felt pretty safe that I was disguised in the crowd. I flew down the flights of stairs and around the turns without stopping. When I finally got down to the platform for the local metro train I needed, I felt safe. I was just catching my breath when I saw none other than the creepy guy come down the stairs and look around for me. When he saw me, he had this evil look in his eye, and I wanted to cry. I grabbed tightly onto my pocket knife in my coat pocket and made my way to a group of harmless-looking Italians and tried to stand in their group. I was standing still about several train car lengths away from him at this point, but he was starting to make his way over to me just as the train pulled up. I hopped on my car immediately and tried to position myself near some people. I noticed he got on a few cars away. As the car was moving, he made his way down the car, into the next, and with each stop the train made, he got a little closer to me. I moved a few cars down from him, but I grew increasingly worried that the farther outside the Metro Rome area, the fewer people were on the train, and he was getting closer to me. When I had made it to the first car and realized I had nowhere else to go, I looked and noticed he was only one car away from me and headed my way. As we pulled into the next stop, I grasped my pocket knife tightly and made a last-ditch effort to evade him and got off the train. I looked to my right and to my horror saw that he was getting off as well and was briskly running toward me. As the last few people shoved past me to get on the train, I realized I had no options left and threw myself back and dove into the train without breaking eye contact with this sicko as the doors of the train closed in front of him, leaving him on the platform, fuming and yelling as the train sped off. Not really believing I had made it safely, I spent the rest of the metro ride still in fight or flight mode and dashed upstairs to my above ground bus up to my campus, making sure I was sitting next to a sweet old lady. The creepy dude never showed up on the bus, and once I had made it back inside my campus walls, I immediately fell to the ground and sobbed. I realized I was so incredibly lucky that I evaded what was probably a certain kidnapping, rape, or murder even. Who knows? But I have never forgotten that man's face, and how it made me feel like I wanted to peel my skin off and crawl under a rock and die.
When I was studying abroad in England for a year, some friends and I went to go see a movie in the closest big city, which was Liverpool. It was just a 30 to 40 minute train ride each way, but we decided to get some dinner and drink a few pints before we headed back to our school. We got a fairly late train and one of our American friends was entertaining us by doing magic tricks. We were being happy and clapping, and obviously a little buzzed, and people started coming around to see him doing magic. I had a thing for a girl there. She ended up dating a friend of mine, but at the time I had a crush on her, so I wasn't focusing on the magic. That may have been why I was the only person who heard someone in the back of the train car say, "Let's go cut that magician's fingers off." About 5 teenagers, ranging from about 14 to 19 years old and averaging the upper limits of the 5-foot height range, started messing with the people watching the magic. First, a man and woman wearing formal wear were being harassed. Nothing physical, but it was getting there. The man pulled his wife out of the chair and left at the next stop. She argued with him as he dragged her out of the door, talking about how she can't leave those kids, my friends and I, on the train. They did the smart thing, and we really should have followed suit. The crowd around us started to dissolve as no one really wants to be involved with this. For all intents and purposes, the thugs were advancing and we were on the back of our heels. We try asking them to leave. It doesn't work. We tell them to leave. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever told someone to leave that has the intention of cutting you open, but all it really does is make them take their knives out faster. More words are exchanged, and we're talking a lot less at this point. I think we're hoping someone does something. But our backs are against the closed door and there's nowhere to run anyway. If security had not arrived by then, they were not going to. We're all just staring at the pocket knives. One of them grabs one of our girls and starts groping her. At that point, pretty much every guy in our group starts seeing red and thinking a combination of damn the consequences, and we weren't going to get out of this anyway. We tackle 2 of them and the others run. The ones on the ground are still fighting back and I get a massive punch to my jaw. The other guys with me aren't fending much better, but by the time I get my bearings, the thugs have run off to another car. We all sigh sighs of incredible relief, still scared out of our minds, and get off at our stop. As we exit the train, some part of my brain just goes into rage mode, and I kick a dumpster as hard as I can and hurt my foot. One of the girls points out that something fell out of my pocket when I did that. I look down and see a pocket knife on the ground, and then check my coat and see the big hole it was just sticking out of. Apparently, he missed me by less than an inch. I never took that train at night ever again after that.